You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Back in 2017, we dedicated an entire episode to an image known as the Falling Man, which many consider to be one of the most powerful photographs taken on September 11th, 2001. We spoke with photographer Richard Drew about the making of the image and the impact it's had on viewers. Similarly, on today's episode, John Harris and I will address one powerful photograph, an image called The Drowning, which was made in 2020 by photographer Cornell Watson. This photograph is currently on display at the National Museum at Duke University and was part of a feature series published in the Washington Post. We'd like to discuss the making of the photograph, its aesthetics, and the significance it holds for Cornell, for his friends, his community, and to better understand it as both a personal statement and as contemporary African-American art. And to that, we're happy to have Cornell Watson join us from North Carolina, as well as photographer, author, and educator Tara Pixley, who's joining us from California. We're going to speak more with Tara in the second half of the program and hear her thoughts on the photo, but thank you both for joining us today. The Drowning is part of a series called Behind the Mask, and we encourage you to follow the link in our show notes to the B&H Podcast homepage or to Cornell's website to see the image and others from his series. On a simply descriptive level, the photo is a scene on the shore of a small lake. On the banks near some rocks, a man is lying on his back atop a large American flag. His shoulders are in the water. His head is almost fully submerged. Two boys play nearby in an otherwise serene lake view. It's an arresting, enigmatic, and powerful image that asks as many questions as it answers, and we look forward to talking about it. Let's introduce Cornell, and we'll do the same for Tara after the break. Cornell Watson is an editorial and commercial photographer whose work has appeared in ads for T-Mobile and Adidas, and in articles for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and closer to his home, Chapel Hill and Durham magazines. He also has a family photography business, and blended into this multifaceted photo practice, he creates personal photo essays such as Happy to See You Here, The Pain and Joy of Black Fatherhood, and of course, Behind the Mask. Cornell Watson, welcome to the show. Your words silenced me, and your photographs took off from there. And I'm looking forward to talking about your work today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I need to take a breath after all that. I'm sorry. Okay. Can you tell us a bit about, and we're going to come back to Tara the second half of the show, but let's start right now with just talking to Cornell. Can you tell us a bit about the series Behind the Mask? When did it start, and how is it different than prior work? And was it fully conceptualized at the inset? How did it evolve?
Yeah, so Behind the Mask it was the first time that I ventured into something outside of family photography. So just to kind of give you a little bit of context. So I had a camera almost 4 years. I picked up a camera almost 4 years ago. And during that time, I decided to take photographs of my daughter, who's now almost 4 years old. She'll be 4 in June. And so the first 2 years of like having that camera, it was mainly just taking photos of her. And then it really evolved into like this family photography business that I was working part-time while I was working full-time in a HR talent acquisition job. And then once the pandemic came along in 2020, that really just made everything go away related to photographing families part-time. And I was really just kind of looking for a way to channel this energy and thoughts and emotions that I had about like what was going on into photography, since I was basically like shut in 4 walls like 24 hours a day because of the pandemic. And so the way it all came together was the Durham Arts Council, which is the city art gallery, reached out to me in March of 2020, I believe it was. And they asked me if I would be interested in having a solo exhibition, which at the time, like I thought was a bit strange because all like 100% of my work at that time was really just all family photography. And but I said yes. I was just like, hell yeah, like a solo exhibition, this would be awesome. But I want to do something outside of family photography for this.
Did they specifically say they wanted you to do a show on your what you thought is what you're known for, your family photographs, or are they looking for something else? Did they articulate anything? Would they just say we want you to do a show?
Yep, it was just, hey, we want you to do a solo exhibition, and I was like, all right, well, and then I responded back and said, give me a little bit of time. I want to think of something. I want to put some new work together for the solo exhibition. And so I really started thinking about things. Again, I'm working in this full-time job in talent acquisition where, I mean, we get this high level view of everything that's kind of going on in corporate America, right? By being in HR. And I started thinking about, everything that was happening with 2020, the pandemic, all the, I guess for now, I just call it like the racial awakening of quote unquote of America but felt like what was happening with the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all those things that were happening. And I just wanted to say something. I'm from Northeastern North Carolina, and I grew up in a small rural area where schools are still segregated for the most part, because of redlining and just how things have continued. And there was a lot that I wanted to say, and I felt like having this solo exhibition was a platform to be able to say those things. And so I came up with this idea of just saying what I wanted to say unapologetically, and I called it Behind the Mask in reference to a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar called We Wear the Mask, where he talks about the many ways that Black people wear this mask to protect themselves from whiteness while walking through society in America. And so I felt like titling it Behind the Mask would be a way to really talk about just these feelings and emotions unapologetically.
One of the things that struck me, it seems that all of this happened in a very, very short period of time. But when I look at your photographs, and in particular, even though this is a show about photography, but I'm going to be talking about text a lot, okay? Your words, okay? These are not things you just sat down and said, what's on my mind? It's obvious that this has been on your mind, woven into your soul for a really, really long time, because your words are extremely clear, okay? You're not alluding to anything, and it's rather honest, and it's extremely real.
Yeah, a lot of the text and a lot of the things that I talk about in Behind the Mask wasn't, really based on like things that I was necessarily experiencing in 2020, but it was a lot of emotions from just life in general.
It's the basic experience that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's great that you were offered a show before the work was even done. And I think so many photographers are blinking their eyes and saying, what the heck, how'd that happen? But how, as you were going to create these images, had you thought about each image ahead of time and you said, this is the story I want to say with each image, and you had kind of really put the concepts, or at least in your head, they were strong before you went to make the images? Or did you kind of just do one at a time and figure it out as you went?
It was definitely one at a time. And I'm almost certain I had an artist statement written out before I started creating the images, because I wanted to be really clear on like what it was that I was creating so that everything was like cohesive. But then I went and started jotting down like my own experiences and things that I wanted to say. But I knew that like my experience alone isn't isn't the full reflection of the Black experience, because Black is the diaspora of like Blackness is so huge, right? You have like Black people from different religions, Black people from different countries, Black people from different ethnicities. There's just a lot when you talk about Blackness, and so I went out to my social media and started asking people if they would share, be interested in being a part of this and share, their experience of, like telling like their story unapologetically about being, Black in America. And we worked together to really shape out something that honored their story as an individual, but also was like a reflection where other Black people could actually see themselves in their stories.
The folks that you reached out to, were they then the ones that were also the subjects or the models, if you will, for the images?
Yep. Yeah. So they were the subjects in the photos. Yeah. So some people were people that I knew, and then some were people that I didn't know. So it was just a mixture of both.
How much did you I hate to use the word editorialize or stage? These are lousy words to use in these photographs, or you allowed your subjects just to be who they are and react to whatever your conversation was about at the time? I mean, what's the background here to these?
Yeah. So I think almost all of them, with the exception of one, are all just really like conceptual. And we'll use the words like staged photos, with the exception of, I believe there's a photo called Weldon, which was back in my hometown. And that one was really just really somewhat spontaneous. Like I saw four boys that were walking right beside where I grew up at while I was taking another photo. And I paused them. Like I asked them if they could hold tight for a minute so that I could take their photo, because it just reminded me so much of my experience growing up in my hometown. So that's the only one. Outside of all the rest of these, we have the structure for what we're going to create, and then we just work around that to make it, what I had envisioned, or close to what the vision was. Like all of these didn't turn out to be the exact vision. There was a little bit of calling a few audibles, but for the most part, they turned out, to represent what the story I was trying to tell.
Did it ever bother you? Maybe that's the right phrase, but was there ever kind of a complication in your mind with this idea between photos that are quote unquote staged and something that is more of a documentary, or were you just kind of free with yourself in the sense that I'm not going to worry, how people are really reading these necessarily in terms of the creation?
Yeah, I wasn't worried at the time, because around the time I was making these, you know, I think it's important to understand that a lot of this was fairly new, just to me in general as a photographer, because I hadn't been on this journey long. And so at the time, I didn't quite know the true distinction between, I mean, I knew what documentary was, but as far as staging photos, I really just wanted to be free and just create whatever it was that I wanted to create with this. I think it's important, that yeah, we have some freedom to create what we want to create. And if we need to make that distinction, then we can. As far as the ethics of documentary, yeah, sure, we can let everyone know that these events didn't really happen. But I think the freedom to create is the most important part when it came to this, to the project.
If I may add, it's very much that if you read the text and look at the photograph, they complement each other. One is a visual statement, and the other is a verbal statement. And in most cases, for me, they said the same thing. We keep referring to the picture of the man with the flag, which is like a keystone image of here. But one picture that kind of hit me pretty heavy was the two women holding the flag, and one with the Molotov cocktail in her hand. And the look on that woman's face, the one holding that bottle, okay, is so real and so determined. And it's like you read the words that were there and you look at her face, and that's exactly what she's saying to herself.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what she's thinking. And it says it. And it's very, very strong. You've had these photographs on display already. And I've had photographs in shows before. Okay. You must hear people discussing your pictures. And I always thought that's kind of a fascinating thing to hear people talking about your work, especially if they don't know that you are the photographer and you're within earshot. Have you heard any of the comments of your pictures? And if so, are they connecting to you, or do you feel like people are getting what you're saying, or are you just amused by what people are walking away with? Or
Yeah.
both?
So when these first went up at the Durham Arts Council, this was in 2020, because of the pandemic, they really limited the amount of people that could go into the building at that point. But the two images are currently up at the Duke Nasher Museum, the Drowning and the Righteous Rage photo, and they're 40 by 60 there. And I've gone there a few times just to see them, and have been like within an earshot of like people discussing like what they see. And I do think that like people get it when they walk up and see it, because it's really hard to ignore. Like when you walk in a room and it's like one of the first things that you see.
I can't imagine looking at some of those images in that size, because it literally would be like a 747 coming down on you.
Yeah, I mean it hits you really hard. And then, like there was an artist talk that I had at the Nasher Museum. It was about a few weeks ago, and a crowd of people came, and it was really my first time talking about the images in public. And yeah, I think for me, it was also just kind of a therapy session to let things out. I mean, I cried. Like I could barely get through talking about the images, because it was the first time that like I had talked, that I was publicly talking about these stories that I had, put together, and like all these emotions that I had bottled up in these images. And yeah, I think it was just a sense of, proud of that, like I'm saying these things out loud, because for so long, like we don't talk about these things.
Or you're talking amongst your friends and no one's really
right.
hearing it.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
We all sit around doing, we all bitch and moan about things, okay? But actually saying it and knowing that people are actually hearing and seeing and reading and thinking, that's powerful. And that's what the difference is. And you did it.
Yep.
And can I ask, where the text that we see on your website, did you also include that in the gallery shows?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the text, so like right now at the Nasher, the text for the Drowning and for Righteous Rage, that's on my website, is beside the image. So people get to, see and read exactly the exact way that I wanted people to see the images.
Great. So let's start digging into the Drowning specifically, because well, that's what we're here to do. However, maybe the text that accompanies the photo does offer some information as to the making of it, but and this may be granular, but can you talk us through even the decision to drive out to this lake, and how that came about? How before you went to shoot, how clear were you on your vision, and who were the people involved, and then we'll go from there.
And how long did he have to hold his head underwater?
Yeah.
I'm saying, I got really uncomfortable. Just looking at the photograph made me very uncomfortable.
It was uncomfortable for him to do that. Like, you just physically uncomfortable to do that. But yeah, I'll start with like just kind of like how we got to the spot.
Go for it.
Like
Go for
how we got to everything. So, and some of this like gets through the text too, but I'll just kind of reiterate for the purposes of our conversation here. So this image came about. So I was at my best friend's house. It was his birthday, and we started doing like this annual tradition thing where we all get together for our birthdays, because we have kids now and we can't go out, to the bars and and do all the fun things we used to do. So we're in the kitchen.
And I'm sorry to jump in. Can you, what month was this? This is 2020. So we're in the middle of the pandemic. Is this in the summer? Is this after George Floyd? When is this happening?
Yeah, this is after George Floyd, and I believe this is like in May-ish, when we're having like his birthday celebration, because it was definitely warm outside, warm enough where the kids could play outside. And we're in the kitchen, we're making cocktails, and I asked them, like, how does it feel to turn 40? I think it was turning 41. It's like, how does it feel to turn 41? And like it got really serious, like really quick, because, for the past, like, it felt like the whole year, like all that had been happening was, the pandemic, police murders that had really been receiving a lot more attention than what they usually had in the media. So there was George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. But just those two alone was enough to really like, really make you think about things. And he started talking about like how turning 41 was like making him not necessarily feel like he was getting older, but it was getting him closer to having to have, the talk with his boys and the conversation about, like we can't do certain things in the front yard anymore. Like we can't play with these toy guns in the front yard, or, we have to, say, be more, say things a certain way when we're in front of certain people, or the yes ma'ams and yes sir, and really like all the respectability politics, and just learning how to wear the mask, to protect yourselves. And so like as he's talking through all these things and just talking about his experiences, like I didn't say much during that conversation, and I just really thought about it, for the rest of the evening. And then when I got home, and what I had come away with was that like he was really describing American racism, and the feeling of being Black in America, when you're dealing with racism as this drowning sensation, because it's really overwhelming. Especially when you have to think about, okay, like, well, what schools, like, what will be a good school for my Black boys, where they won't have to tolerate racism as much, or, will they get the resources that they need, as it relates to police violence, like those kind of things. Like it's, American racism really is like a death by like 1,000 cuts, type of feeling. And so I went back to him a few weeks later and told him like how I had been listening to like what he had said during his birthday, and had come up with this photo concept that I wanted to do to really visualize, what he was describing. And the initial photo concept was him, being submerged in the water. But the original idea was really an overhead shot where he was laying on the flag, and you could see the flag like, beneath the water. And we started scouting out places. Like he had told me about this place that he takes his boys to out on the lake in Durham County. And so we went there one day to scout it out. This is probably like in early June. We went there to scout it out. And that summer it rained so much that there was no bank area where you could just like lay out at the lake, because the water was so high. And we kept going back to check things out, and the water had just never receded. And so in July, on the 4th of July, we were I was at my house, he was at his, and I had called him to see like what they were up to. And they weren't doing anything. And I was like, you know what? Like, it hasn't rained in like, like over 2 weeks. It feels like it's like we should go out to the lake today and see if the water is receded. And if so, we should shoot that photo that I was talking about, especially because it's the 4th of July. Like, I feel like it's such a statement, especially about the way we feel about the 4th of July, considering that we weren't free on this day. And so I honestly didn't think that he was going to be willing to go on the 4th of July, because it's such like, it's a busy day at the lake on the 4th. And to take, 2 boys under the age of 4 to the lake is just a whole task within itself. But him and his partner were down with it. And so my partner came, and my 4-year-old, well, she's 4 now, but at the time she was, 2. She came to help. So we get out to the lake. There's like a lot of people out at the lake. We probably spend about 20 minutes working on this photo, because like we're basically like trying to hurry up and get it done. So we get down to the lake. We're working on this photo. The spot that we had initially, actually, I had placed the flag a little bit further down in that same spot, but the water wasn't deep enough. And so we made an adjustment and moved the flag to where it's at in the photo. And then I got him situated. And then we got the boys the water guns, and we just kind of let them react to what was going on. And it maybe took all of like 5 minutes for the shot to happen. Like, what you're looking at in the photo is probably about 5 minutes until once we finally got set up. And we had people that were like walking over and kind of asking, like, what are y'all doing? Like, what's going on? And
But with what tone,
um,
though?
yeah, so I think it's like a mixture, right? Like a mixture was like genuine curiosity, and then some of it was, I think, like, what are they saying? Like, is this like an indictment against like America? Like what is it?
About the photo itself, did you try different compositions? Did you relocate the camera to a different angle? Were there other shots with your friend's head in a different position or his body in a different position?
Yeah, so I tried a couple different ways. Because see, like part of the problem was that like where the flag is at, there was no more land left. Like where I'm standing, I'm actually standing in the water where I'm standing at in the photo to take the photo. Um, but yeah, I had another camera body that had so I used Fuji gear. I had a 16 millimeter, and then I had I believe the other lens I had was like the 35 millimeter Fuji, which is like a 50 millimeter equivalent. The one that I took this photo with was like a 23 millimeter equivalent. And I tried a couple different angles with it. Initially, I was like trying to photograph like my initial idea of like shooting overhead. But I liked the way that the horizon was and that you couldn't see anybody out there. So I just went ahead and took advantage of the fact that like we could use the rest of the lake for the image. And especially since the boys, I mean, the thing about like shooting kids is like you really can't direct kids, especially like their age.
You
It's like,
noticed?
yeah, it's like you just kind of like have to wait and just see how they react to certain things. And um, I think that's where like photographing families came into play, and it also helped that like I knew them and that the kids knew me, and so it wasn't like it was our first time interacting together, but it was their first time just kind of seeing this scene though. So I was able to just kind of be a fly on the wall and capture it.
And particularly the boy on the right, was that just a look that he was giving, to his dad, or did you actually direct him and say, "Hey, take a look over there"? And because the expression on his face is perfect in some ways.
Yeah, no, I really didn't direct them at all here. So once we gave them the water guns, they were actually playing down. You see, like the big rock in the back where it's kind of smooth over. They were over there at first, and me and my best friend were over here, like trying to figure out like how to get his head under the water without dying without dying in the water. Because like putting your head back that way, like this, like the water just rushes up your nose, and so we tried we tried a couple times, and then once he was like felt comfortable, like go like laying back and blow like slowly blowing out to so that all the water didn't rush up his nose, like um the boys like then started to look over. They came back over that way and looked over. And then you can actually, speaking of like how the water had like risen up like during the summer, you can see like part of like the water line on that rock in
Hmm.
the background a little bit.
Yeah.
You kind of see like how high it was during the summer.
And did you feel that you had the photo that you wanted when you left, or did it take you kind of going back home and looking at them and editing and going, all right, I have what I'm looking for, or did you not realize you had what you were looking for until it was displayed and people reacted?
No, I knew we had the photo when we left, and I knew we had it like from their first initial reaction when they turned around and started walking closer to where he was laying at under the water. Um, and then the rest of them was much different because at that point, like they were just being kids at that point, just like they just wanted to play with the water guns at the lake. And so the other thing was like just trying to hurry up and get out of there. Um, because the longer that we wait around, the more that we have to deal with people like, asking what are we doing and potentially getting into a bad situation, which had already happened prior to this with another image where for the Righteous Rage photo that we were talking about earlier, we had someone that parked a vehicle across the street from where we were at in the field, and they watched us the entire time. And then when they thought we were done, I'm 99% sure they called the cops. because when we were actually getting ready to leave, there were two sheriffs that pulled up.
Can I ask what your friend thinks of the photo? I mean, was he pleased with it? And how much was the collaboration? I mean, were you really talking through it with him a lot about, the use of the flag and getting his boys involved and the whole thing? Or did he just kind of come along as a friend and wanted to help you out?
No, I described like the image to him before we took the photo. But I don't think that I don't think he knew the gravity of the photo until after he saw it. And I think initially, like for him, it's personal, so like there's a lot of emotions that go into that. Like when you see yourself, you see your boys, and the way that they're looking at you in this particular image, that's really hard to see. But I think now it's taken on new meaning. Like I think what's happening is, like, at first I think he saw himself, right? He sees himself and sees his boys in the image. But I think a lot of people don't. A lot, like 100% of the people that see this image, they don't see him as the individual that he is. Like, they see a Black person, right? And it's more of a reflection of just Black people in general and Black boys, not necessarily his two individual boys. So I think initially is personal, and it is a personal image because it is about his story, but it is also a reflection of the story of just Black people in general in America.
We are going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to be speaking with Tara Pixley. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back, and we are with Cornell Watson talking about his photo, The Drowning. And we also have with us Tara Pixley. Tara Pixley is a photographer, director, author, and educator. Her credits are many, but to name a few, she shot assignments for the Wall Street Journal and ESPN magazine. Her writing on photography has appeared in Newsweek, the New York Times, Visual Communication Quarterly, and Zeek magazine. She's on the board of NPPA, WPPI, and the Authority Collective, of which she's a co-founder. We're just scratching the surface here, so freshen up your coffee. I'll give you a moment here, okay? Tara is also a visiting fellow at the Nieman Foundation for Journalism of Harvard University and is an assistant professor of journalism at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. Question, what strikes you first when you see The Drowning?
So I first saw this image, I think probably about a year ago or so, and it is so striking. The first thing that stands out to me is the flag and the expressions on the children. That just kind of jumps right off of the page. And, perhaps I've been thinking about this, and I think I might be drawn to the children as a parent, and I have a sort of complicated relationship to both parenting and childhood in America specifically. So seeing the juxtaposition of the flag and the children brings to mind a lot of those things for me. And then I noticed the way that the composition of the image, it's almost like a yin and yang of darkness and light. Like we have the darkness of the trees and the shore, and in comparison to the light of the water and the sky. So that's really, I think, and then of course I begin to look at the body and see how that is playing into the image itself. Thinking more about the sort of aesthetic and formal compositional elements of the image, we have this kind of triangular relationship between the two children and the man, the father figure. And so it's this return of gazes where the boys are looking there, but he's not looking back because he's submerged in the water. And so it's this, for me, it's this kind of interesting commentary on childhood and parenting, and especially what it means to be a Black child and a Black parent in America. This kind of looking forward, looking up, trying to understand what is happening, and the gaze of the child that is both like an interrogation and inquisitive, curious, wanting to understand, and how you as a parent either engage with that or disengage. And I think there's this element of the disengaging here, the disengagement of the gaze, in part because the horror of being a Black person in America, you don't want to relay that to your children. You don't want them to bear that burden. I remember the first time I talked to my son about what it meant for him to be a Black boy in America when he was 10. And his father and I and the three of us just sat on the sofa discussing it and crying together, because he already kind of understood the weight of that. And so I see a lot of that in this image, the weight of what it means to be Black in America, and how we have to, as parents, prepare our children for that. And that, that just like that sense of never being able to raise your head above the water, and knowing that you have to, in some way, repeat this cycle that you're trying to get out of.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to kind of return to some of the things that you brought up earlier about talking about the difference between documentary and a sort of directed image, and all images have a viewpoint. I'm a photojournalist. I've worked as a visual journalist for 20 years. And, my particular approach to photography is kind of traditional documentary. But I think that this sense of a division, or it being like less true, is not necessarily the case. Like, this image it's documenting an experience from an important viewpoint. And it's clear to me that these are photo illustrations, this one in particular, and it's doing the work it's meant to do. It's relaying something true, like all good art does. And formally, it's a beautiful image. It's using the negative space thoughtfully, balancing light and shadow in this incredible way, the positioning of the children, the body and the flag, and compositional conversation with the horizon and the sky and the trees. It's just so well balanced, and it feels like nothing's out of place. And I think in many ways, that's the benefit of a fine art approach, the level of finely honed control that Cornell is able to have here over the visual narrative. That's something that journalism documentary just can't have. And those are just different spaces, right? Like, it's different spaces of conveying information and experience.
And did you know this photo in the context of the series before you saw it? Because I think I saw it myself the first time just on its own, not realizing I had to kind of look back to find the rest of the work.
I did see it in the context of a series. I can't quite recall where I first saw this, but I think this was the first image, and this one really stuck with me. And also, I forget the name of the other one, but the Molotov cocktail, the women holding that, these two photos just resonated so deeply, and I thought were so excellently done.
And Cornell, are those the photos that, those are the two that are in the current show, but are they the ones that seem to get the most attention?
Those are the ones that get the most attention. There's also the one of the family at the dinner table, the one that's called the kitchen table incident, that also gets a lot of attention. And then there's another one called eggshells that typically gets attention too. Those four for sure get the most conversation.
Yeah, the kitchen table incident, I think, is such a beautifully done bringing together of two historical moments in art. And I would say that actually the drowning, for me, brought to mind Carrie Mae Weems's work as well. The kitchen table incident is like a clear, reimagining of her kitchen table series. But this work overall, and specifically this project, it has a similar dreamlike quality of depicting Black life that for me it's like similar to Deanna Lawson's work. The genre and tone puts me in mind of Carrie Meem's work, and it has these vibes of a lot of different things that we're seeing now. I think, like, also the TV show Atlanta. Like, there's this desire to ruminate on Blackness and to bring together these different visual traditions across the sort of like last century of Black people photographing and filming and documenting and telling stories about Blackness. And so I think that the drowning, it strikes a different tonal note to me than in the storytelling itself than the kitchen table incident, because the kitchen table incident is very, it's angry, it's action oriented, it's saying, screw this, we're going to do something about this, and we're ready to meet that challenge. And I think that the drowning is more about the everyday existence of actually drowning underneath those challenges. It's documenting through art an experience that people are having. And I think that actually can be more powerful in many ways than strict documentary or photojournalism, because then you're constrained to what is presented in front of you. And these images are pulling out undertones. Like it's speaking to the reality that people experience, their like lived experience, but it's actually surfacing a lot more through that approach.
I'd like to ask about the flag, actually, and I'm trying to read the flag as an item in the photo and kind of understand it, where it could have been, how else it could have been done, and we don't need to go there. Obviously, this is the artist's decision, but I'm wondering if you've had any thoughts on the meaning of the flag and its placement and how he's lying on top of it.
Whenever you put forward a symbol like a flag, it speaks to that in-group, and it's thereby also invoking the out-group. So whenever I'm looking at an American flag that's very intentionally placed in relationship to Black people, Black community, it's speaking to that irony. That's really, the very poignantly true about this symbolism of the flag on the beach. It brings to mind, like, it looks like a real 4th of July experience, but as a Black person, that's always bittersweet. It's a vacation that feels both beautiful and morose. It's a celebration in the way that funerals are celebrations of life, but also mourning of what is lost. And every 4th of July, where you're surrounded by Americans who, typically white Americans, who are kind of uncritically celebrating the freedom of America without actually engaging and recognizing that not everyone was free. And really, white women were not free. There were many kinds of people who were not free. Essentially, anyone who wasn't a white man at the point of the 4th of July was not free in this nation.
And Cornell, did you envision this idea as someone who is actually drowning, or struggling while they're drowning, or someone who is already dead?
Yeah, like I was talking about earlier about him actually describing like his experience was, for me, the sensation of drowning. I don't necessarily think that in his feelings that he had already drowned, but it's like this it's in the act of drowning, like there's still time to save, to save him. But I guess when we look back historically at like America and Black people being having this violence inflicted on them via racism, like historically, like no one comes to save us. So yeah, I think to answer your question about like, has he drowned already or is he drowning? I think he's drowning, hasn't drowned yet.
And that to me, brings the looks of the children into what you mentioned there, and the idea of can he be saved? And with his children looking on, it brings even more power. Are they going to be able to save him? Should they be asked to save him? All these questions and the look on both their faces is different, but certainly registers the fear and the anxiety of the boys.
Yeah, Tara, and I like y'all were talking about like the difference between the drowning and the kitchen table incident, and I like the point that Tara brought up about like like the drowning has like that hint of childhood innocence where the child in the the kitchen table incident is different. Like, and I also think that like there is the presence of like, the water guns and the drowning, which, it's like it's like this innocent childhood, thing that you can have. But in the kitchen table incident, like there's an actual shotgun. It's almost like there's this parallel between the two weapons where one can, in the drowning, they can't really defend themselves with the water guns. Whereas in the kitchen table incident, that the dad really is talking about like taking up arms to take action to defend themselves. I just think that, Tara, it's interesting that you brought that up, because that image, it is about the two pieces by John Wilson and Carrie Mae Weems, but it's also really based on a true story where those are my neighbors that I met during the pandemic. And after the first time I met them, one of the conversations that came up was about being able to defend yourself as a Black person, if a situation like Breonna Taylor happened, where, you got police that are barging into your home unannounced, like, what are you going to do? And he was urging me to buy a weapon to protect my family. And that's all I could keep thinking about was that John Wilson mural, and how the dad in that image was taking up arms to protect his family. But yeah.
And Cornell, maybe we can wrap up by asking you, how has the reception to this image been for you? I mean, what in general has the reception? And we talked a bit earlier about the reception, but has this series changed your photographic career to some degree? Has it, or the trajectory of your career? I mean, and maybe even more important than that, I mean, the reaction that you've gotten from colleagues, friends, family, with regarding this image specifically, but the Behind the Mask series in general, has it been mostly positive, and how's it been for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess to answer your first question about like, has it changed like my career? Yeah. So like I had mentioned earlier in the conversation, like I was just primarily doing like family documentary. And after I created the Behind the Mask series, I got it published on the Washington Post photography section with Kenneth Dickerman. And really after that, like a whole different world opened up. Like I started photographing assignments for the Washington Post and the New York Times and a bunch of other national publications. And I got awarded the Alexia grant from Syracuse Communication School to continue work like Behind the Mask. And so, yeah, I got laid off. So that job I was working, I got laid off in June of 2020 from that job, and I have not looked back. So I've been full time, freelance photographer, primarily doing photojournalism for the past almost 2 years now. And
I think it's worth mentioning, if I can interject, okay, I think it's important to mention that you lost your job on a Friday. You got the word that was it. It was kibosh, okay? And you got a magazine assignment from Durham Magazine the following Monday, after what was most likely a very melancholy weekend, okay?
Yep.
Now, that, how much praying did you do on that Sunday? I mean,
it's
seriously,
so crazy.
That is amazing.
It's so crazy too, because the day that my last day on my job was on Juneteenth.
Right.
And so I tell people, it's like, oh, I got my freedom papers on Juneteenth to do my thing. Yeah, I'm finally free. Like I'm free. I'll say whatever I want to say now. And then that Monday I got a call out of the blue from Durham Magazine to ask if I was interested in freelancing. While
and how long did you think about that answer, huh?
I said yes immediately. I was like, yeah, I'm available. That quickly led to a connection with the Washington Post. So one of my first assignments with Durham Magazine was photographing Keith Knight, who is the writer, co-producer for a show on Hulu called Woke. And so I photographed him for Durham Magazine, and he called me back a few weeks later and was like, hey, the Washington Post is doing a story about me and my show. I want to connect you with a photo editor. And so I did those images, and then I reached back out to Kenneth Dickerman to let him know, like, hey, like, I just worked with the Post on this assignment. I got this photo story that I've just done, wanted to get your eyeballs on it, see what your thoughts are. And he responded back and was like, yeah, I'd love to publish this. And then that's kind of like when the floodgates opened up with like this whole new world of, photojournalism, that I had no idea about, really had no idea about.
I love it.
And
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's been crazy since. And then your second question was about like the reception to the image, to the photo series. Like, it's mostly been positive. Especially like hearing from people that look like me, from other Black people that say that like they feel seen, they feel heard in the series. I think is like the most important part. Because like that was the goal, was to really like amplify like how we were feeling, and have those emotions and those feelings out there to finally be heard. And so I do feel like that it's achieved that goal. But I think secondary is that it's also really created conversation, especially with white people, to make them think about, okay, like, we had like like parts of this conversation last year with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And I really do think that like, having especially the drowning and some of the other pieces helps us to continue to have these conversations, because, things do tend to just like end, like we're not having the quantity of conversations that we were in 2020. Right. But I think that like things like this do help us continue to have those discussions and conversations to help move us forward.
Yeah. A very interesting conversation. Again, and I think this had to do a lot with photography and words. And this is one situation where the two of them really weave beautifully, and it's just a great combination and a powerful body of work. Cornell Watson, thank you so much for joining us today. If people would like to catch up on your work, where can they go to?
Yes, thanks again. Thanks for having me. If people want to catch up on my work, the best two places are my website, which is cornellwatson.com. And then I regularly update my Instagram with work, which is Cornwizzle at Instagram. That's CORNWHIZZLE.
And all this will be in our show notes. Any other shows or anything coming up, things that people could go see your work live?
Live, let's see. Right now, I'm in an exhibition at the Duke Nasher Museum. The name of that show is called Reckoning and Resilience: The Drowning and Righteous Rage is there, 40 by 60. I'm also at a show at the Mint Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina. There is an exhibition happening at the Chapel Hill Library of the photo series that I did during my artist residency at UNC Chapel Hill. That photo series called Tarred Healing. The full series is actually up on the Washington Post under the photography section. And it's called Tarred, TARRED, Healing, HEALING. It's a play on words of the Tar Heels and Tarred Healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just wish you that the momentum for what you're doing in your work just continues, because it's real strong and it's worthy. So again, thank you for everything on that. And Tara, if people want to catch up with your work, where can they go to?
Well, you can always check out my website at tarapixley.com and my Instagram. I'd love it if you followed me at TLPix. So that's TLPIX. And I also wanted to encourage and invite people to check out Authority Collective. It's an organization that I'm currently executive director and I'm one of the founding members. And it's an organization that works to bring attention to women of color and non-binary media makers of color. So it's kind of photographers, filmmakers, people working in VR and AR, and it's all women and non-binary people of color working in that space. And we sort of have created a community. It's an international community, and it would be wonderful for folks to support by checking out at Authority Collective on Instagram, and authoritycollective.org is the website. And one last thing, I've been overseeing the latest State of Photography survey and study, and that's going to launch at stateofphotography.com. So encourage folks to check that out. It's a international survey that we did and a project we've been doing analyzing this survey for 1.5 years, working with the Knight Foundation and Catchlight.
Okay, check our show notes for those links and for the links to the gear we discussed in this episode. We'd also like to thank Kara Finnegan and Michael Shaw for their help organizing this conversation. Check out their work at readingthepictures.org or on Instagram at Reading the Pictures. Now, if you'd like to subscribe to the B&H Photography Podcast, just search for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or find us on B&H Explorer or the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group page. Today's conversation has been edited for length, and the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual guests and do not represent the views of B&H Photo. With that said, on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, my name is Alan White, and thank you oh so much for joining us today.